also on YouTube as well. I have an order of bills. Mr. Secretary, I see you and I welcome you to today's hearings. Under normal circumstances, I would have shifted the bills and had you go first and not make you wait. We've had to put a list on the internet and on the website, so I'm going to follow the list. So none of the bills should be long. So if you show a little patience, we'll try not to inconvenience you too much so you can get on to other business that you may have. That being said, we're going to start with Senate Bill 310, election law, campaign finance entities. SBE, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is Jared Demarinis, Director of Candidacy and Campaign Finance for the Maryland State Board of Elections. SBE, and I just wanted to thank the Chair for sponsoring this departmental legislation. This removes a subject, and you've probably heard this before because it was here last year as well. It's a very simple bill. It removes a subjective deadline for when campaign finance entities are required to file its final report. It just removes the provision that payment of the final debt occurring in connection with a candidacy triggers the 8 years start date for the final report. We've had one or two instances where the payment of the debt in connection with the candidacy was years later, and it was just a subjective deadline where we just want to keep the other ones to be a part of just the end of the term of office and when the date when the individual was last a filed candidate. Those are just very easy to enforce and move forward with it. So, but we would, the legislation also requires notice to the committees before the 8 years, and so that they would be able to know that that they would be forced to file their final report or make a determination as to on their candidacy. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and continue on with this. So.
Okay, there are no witnesses, so committee members, if you have questions of Mr. Demarinis, now's the time to ask.
Thank you, and I have a great, looking forward to working with you for the remainder of this session here. It's great to have the first the bill hearing underway for me, so thank you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Demarinis. That concludes the SB 310. We're going to move to SB 343. This is Department of Natural Resources and a department bill. I have Mr. Kittrick, Ms. Widman, and no opposition. Please.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair. I don't see you, but I'm sure you're out there somewhere. James McKittrick, Director, the DNR. With me, as always, is Sarah Widman in our Fisheries Division. We're here today in support of our departmental bill, which would enable the first commercial new commercial fishery in several years. And that fishery is for shrimp. And without kind of belaboring the background here, for ecological and climate reasons, shrimp are growing more numerous in the bay, especially on the lower part of the bay. And so there's some interest. There has already been some ad hoc harvest and sale. I can tell you that unfortunately I can't offer you samples this year. But I can tell you it's quite delicious. So this bill would simply allow us to have a commercial fishery, to authorize us to work together with all our stakeholders and develop the rules for how we're going to do it moving forward. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Will Ms. Widman be speaking, or is she just back up?
She's just back up.
Okay. A significant backup, mind you, but okay. Other questions, committee? Yes, Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good to see you again. And so this is my first time hearing about shrimp being harvestable in the bay. And so I just have a question. I know the main sports catch, rockfish, eat shrimp and all that stuff. How would we allow commercial harvesting of shrimp, as I believe this is what this bill allows, affect the striped bass population because of, I guess might be one of their favorite diet?
That's a great question. Actually, I'm not exactly sure about the rockfish in terms of pursuing shrimp because it's maybe Sarah has some more background on that. But I can tell you, in devising the rules of the road, if you will, for the commercial fishery, bycatch is always a concern. Certainly, we don't foresee and we would not allow a shrimp fishery like you'd see down in the Gulf. Large trawlers. Scooping up, everything that goes in front of it. We're talking very modest, because the population is relatively modest. We wouldn't be seeing that sort of large scale activity, and therefore wouldn't anticipate any issues by bycatch of other sensitive species.
Other questions? Let me ask one while we're waiting. Is the need for the shrimp fishery at all due to changing temperature in the bay and climate change?
So there's some speculation on that. I heard, and this is all anecdotal, right? That some turbulent weather down south, hurricanes and such, have believed to have brought the first, harvestable group of shrimp up the bay. But there, obviously is speculation that this may be a consequence of climate change in some way. But again, it's not determined scientifically, but anecdotally.
Okay, other questions for Mr. McKittrick or Ms. Widman? Again, there's no opposition. It's starting fishery is shrimp fishery. Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 343. We will move to 344. Agriculture cost sharing program, state cost sharing funds. We have Ms. Shirk from the department, Mr. Schmidt, and well, I'm a little confused here. We have 5 witnesses and we're only allowing 4. I apologize. Ms. Shirk and Mr. Schmidt in favor, and then they're going to be followed by opposition, Mr. Gerard from CBS.
Where are the Zoom backgrounds? Yeah.
I'm sorry if someone,
You should mute her. You should mute.
somebody needs to be muted. That's another subcommittee background for Zoom. Okay, Ms. Shirk, Mr. Schmidt, you want to start off?
Sure.
Yes,
I'll just say that I'm here as Hans's backup, so I'm really just going to yield my time to him.
Okay, Mr. Schmidt.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Hans Schmidt. I'm the Assistant Secretary for the Office of Resource Conservation at the Maryland Department of Agriculture. Senate Bill 344 would permit the Maryland Department of Agriculture to provide up to 100% state funding assistance in order to accelerate the implementation of certain high priority conservation practices to improve water quality, provide environmental benefits, and meet the state of Maryland's Phase 3 Watershed Implementation Plan, or WIP goals, approved by EPA by 2025. Maryland is currently capped, or MDA is currently capped at 87.5% state cost share. The state of Maryland's obligated to meet the WIP goals for Chesapeake Bay restoration, and much of the necessary nutrient reductions come from the agricultural sector. Maryland farmers have committed to do their part to help the state meet the WIP goals. However, some conservation practices, such as streamside buffers, waterways, wetland creation, forest buffers, and subsurface denitrifying bioreactors are running at a pace that will fall short of meeting the 2025 WIP goals. Maryland farmers work on slim profit margins as it is, and in some cases may not be able to provide the 12.5% out-of-pocket funds needed to meet the required USDA and NRCS construction standards. It becomes a double whammy to the farmer when the implementation of many of these practices that I've mentioned result in a loss of crop production acres and require new maintenance requirements. To the farmer, there is no financial gain by installing these practices. However, the state of Maryland benefits from the WIP credits needed to meet the Chesapeake Bay water quality goals. MDA's ability to provide the additional funding assistance needed will be an important incentive to farmers to install these practices, and as I said earlier, accelerate the progress. Currently, the department's MAX program has sufficient GO bond funding to cover the requested increase in funding assistance and does not anticipate budget shortfalls. This afternoon, we ask for your support for Senate Bill 344. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Mr. Schmidt? Senator Riley, followed by Senator Ellis. Unmute Senator Riley, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hans, how many dollars are in the fund right now?
I'm sorry, say that again.
How many dollars are in the fund? You said there's sufficient funds to handle the requirements.
Well, we due to some changes through legislation that was last year that has restricted some of the ability to cost share on practices like CAFO operations, certain CAFO operations. There has been a shift in construction on particularly on livestock operations. Those dollars are going to be shifted that are carryover dollars that we have, or actually dollars that we have in the bonds to be utilized for these types of practices. These types of practices are far cheaper than, say, manure management and so forth.
I understand that it's a dollar question.
It's the dollar question, and I don't have the dollar number for you.
Would you get it back to the committee when you have a chance?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll do that.
The issue is, how do you identify high priority projects? What part of state government analyzes the different projects that are submitted and selects quote unquote high priority projects?
These practices are identified by the Chesapeake Bay program, and these are the practices that are accredited through the WIP program. So they've already, it's not, so when we talk about high priority practices, all these practices are high priority, but when it comes to practices that we feel like we're running short, that we think we need some additional assistance, it's the department that has identified, again, these practices, these buffer practices, these practices that filtrate nutrients from running into the bay. They don't have a production component to them.
Hans, I understand how the analysis of what types of practices. My question was, who decides which individual projects get selected?
It's not so much which individual, it's the types of practices, and the department would have the discretion to determine what types of practices would be the priority.
So if 30 stream side buffers were submitted for request for funding, who decides what's at the top of the list?
We have never denied a practice, providing that they all fall within the compliance of nutrient management, that they all fall within the design that has been soil conservation districts have provided. We've been able to provide cost share assistance for all those practices that have come through our cost share program.
Thank you for your answer. If you get the committee the numbers on dollars and cents.
Yes, sir.
Chair.
Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, good to see you. I'm kind of new to the General Assembly, and we have so many topics we go over in this committee. And I apologize, I don't know all your acronyms, and being such, you lost me, okay? So you're talking about WIP goals, you're talking about RCS standards, like safer operations. I don't know what you're talking about. Could you please start with WIP, RCS, and CAFO, and maybe I can understand what the issue is that we deal with.
Yes, sir. My apologies. In resource conservation, we deal with a lot of different acronyms, and sometimes it just becomes second nature. So when we talk about the WIP, and that's the overarching watershed implementation plan, that plan was developed by the state of Maryland to direct into to meeting our Chesapeake Bay water quality goals. And the state of Maryland is under commitment to meeting water quality goals by 2025, just like all our other surrounding Chesapeake Bay watershed states, and also including the District of Columbia. When I mentioned NRCS, NRCS is the Natural Resource Conservation Service. It's that one area or one wing of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's one subgroup of or committee or agency in USDA. When we talk about CAFOs, concentrated feeding operations for livestock operations. So all those operations that fall under CAFOs are permitted through the Department of Environment. And those operations are required under under the EPA general discharge permit, required to meet certain guidelines and certain conservation practices.
Okay, so thank you. So with all these definitions now, I know where the bill is going. So what does this SB 344 will do or propose to do?
So a lot of the practices that I just mentioned are practices that would be installed on farms, and what farmers would have to do. And let's just take a little step back. Our soil conservation districts have staff, planners and technicians that go out to the farms. They meet with the farmers and they walk the farms to address any resource concerns that they have on those farms. The Department of Agriculture, through our agricultural cost share program, as well as the NRCS cost share program, we design the practice. They meet the federal standards, and then there's cost share assistance that's available sometimes only through the state, sometimes only through the feds, and sometimes co-cost share. But those designs come back to the Department of Agriculture. And there's a cost share there's a cost of building those practices, and we submit those requests to the Board of Public Works to help farmers cost share on those practices. And right now we are capped at being able to provide up to 87.5% of those costs. So the purpose of this bill is for certain practices that we identify where we think we're falling behind to help accelerate to put these additional practices on the ground. So like I said, those practices, there is no financial gain to the farmer. They're taking out a portion of their field to install these practices. It will not go back into crop production, but on the other side, the credit that we get through the Chesapeake Bay program helps Maryland itself meeting our goals toward Chesapeake Bay goals that are required by 2025.
So, Mr. Chairman, could I ask another quick follow-up?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so this bill will increase or decrease that cost share percentage?
It'll increase it from the 87.5% to 100%.
Okay, and so that will make the programs more accessible to Maryland farmers?
It makes it more enticing for farmers to put those practices on the ground. Like I said, there's no financial gain for them for putting it on now. They have to pay out 12.5% of the cost to install these practices, providing they're getting cost share. But for Maryland to help Maryland move forward to meeting our goals, this allows farmers to help accelerate that progress.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate your patience and breaking down.
No problem. Anytime.
Thank you.
No, it's very important that you ask those kind of questions and we put the insider lingo aside. So until we get familiar with it. So thank you for the question, Senator Ellis. Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Senator Ellis pretty much asked the question I was going to ask, but a couple of the farms I run have some of these practices that have happened. They've been a real benefit to the environment as you talk about. But my question is, I guess this is more of a recruiting thing than anything, because you're saying that that 12.5% part that the farmer would have to put in would also oftentimes be a impediment to them saying yes to going along with the project. Is that the main reason to change this?
That's correct, yes. And, so this would help entice, again, those farmers, to say, the state's paying 100%, or through cost share with some of our other partners, that it won't be a cost to the farmer, but it will be a credit to Maryland as a state for meeting with.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Schmidt, I don't want to preclude or take the polish off of Mr. Gerard's testimony, but he raises the questions of doing fewer projects with more money. If no additional money comes into the program, you might very well be doing fewer projects than we have now, and that the farmer might not have any skin in the game. And some of it can be used for storage of waste, et cetera. Is there any concern that the money, I don't want to say gets buried, but invested in a significant number of fewer projects, which may or not pay off, and we're not thinking outside of the box and trying other projects that may not have been explored before?
No, there's not that concern. Like I said, there has been some changes to the regulations through last year on limiting on, how much cost share we can provide for large manure operations. In addition to that, we've been we've received some federal grant funds to help assist us with, particularly with the dairy operations in northern Western Maryland, in addressing manure storage out there. So those costs, or those fund savings that we would have there, would help assist us with putting some of these other projects on the ground. And as I said earlier, manure storage, manure management practices are very costly. And as we go away or look for other funding sources or receive funding sources to help offset some of those state cost share, that's cost savings that we have that we can use for these other practices that are far less expensive to install. So to answer your question, no, there's not that concern. We estimate we haven't fallen short of accepting, and cost sharing on practices. We've been able to, meet the needs of the farmers that are out there. And at this time, we do not foresee any budget shortfalls.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the proponents. We do have one opponent, Mr. Gerard. Share with us your thoughts.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Alan Gerard. I'm the Eastern Shore Director with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Here in opposition to Senate Bill 344, which increases state cost share for agriculture conservation projects from 87.5% to 100%. Why would CBF oppose more money for bay restoration? 3 reasons. First, the bill will reduce the number of projects that receive funding because it eliminates the requirement for a landowner to share in the cost of projects. Since the total amount of state funding is not changed, limited dollars without a required additional investment from landowners will result in a fewer number of projects on farms that protect water quality. Second, the bill upends years of settled cost share policy. The current practice supported by MDA of landowners sharing in the cost of conservation projects results in a strong incentive to operate and maintain projects long term. MDA's own data, that many previously funded projects are not performing as intended. Landowners need more incentive to maintain projects long term, not less. Finally, the bill can result in funding for projects that are expensive and inefficient. Last year, this committee passed Senate Bill 597, which prioritizes cost-effective practices like tree planting and pasture for livestock. Many of these practices have a $50,000 funding cap, while underperforming practices like manure storage facilities are capped at $200,000. These caps that are set administratively mean that more money can go to projects that return less benefits to water quality, a problem that's made worse when the state provides a higher amount of funding for conservation projects. For these reasons, we urge an unfavorable report on Senate Bill 344. Thank you.
A question for Mr. Gerard. Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Gerard. My one question would be, what would you say to those farmers who are, they want to help the environment, they want to do some of these kind of programs, but the 12.5% is a concern, especially ones that have had, in the dairy industry that probably 9 of the last 10 years, they've lost money. What would you say to those farmers that would like to do this, but the 12.5% is holding them back?
Yeah, I think what we need to do is to ensure that the limited resources that the department has at its disposal to invest in those practices are going to the most cost-effective ones. This cap issue where inefficient practices from a nutrient reduction standpoint, like manure storage, as the Assistant Secretary pointed out, that higher cap for those practices really can enable these limited dollars that we have go to poorly performing practices. So I think there may be room to work administratively to ensure that all practices either have the same cap, or the ones that are going to produce the most nutrient reduction for the least cost are prioritized or have a higher cap.
Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gerard, I'm not following why manure storage is not an efficient use of these dollars, because studies have shown that nitrates in the bay is increased tremendously by runoff from manure, especially on the Eastern Shore. We have all those poultry plants, and and a big issue is the manure and manure management. And so why would the state helping to efficiently store manure be not a very effective use of those dollars?
Yeah, it's a good question. This committee and many other committees and commissions have been focused on poultry litter and how to best management. It just comes down to cost efficiency. As Hans indicated, these manure storage structures are expensive, and there are much less expensive alternatives. I mentioned a couple of them: streamside forested buffers, pasture for livestock. In terms of dollars per pound, if the state is going to be investing its resources, we absolutely need to be prioritizing in those practices that are going to produce the most results for water quality at the least cost.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand that answer. I have trouble. Maybe I'll process it later. Maybe you can follow up with me, please. Email me and we can have a conversation, because I'm not really sure what that answer meant, and I don't want to take up more time.
Yes, sir. We're happy to do that.
I'm going to follow up with one quick question.
Yes, sir.
Gerard, would you support going up to 100% if there were an amendment that said cost effective per pound of reduction?
We'd be happy to work with the chairman or whoever would want to work on such an amendment to ensure that we find the best way for these limited dollars to go to the most cost-effective practices.
Okay, thank you. Further questions for Mr. Gerard? If not, we will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 344 and move to 346. Also, Department of Natural Resources. We have Mr. McKittrick and Ms. Woodman, I assume, is back up again. And then we do have one individual written unfavorable. But in terms of oral presentation, Mr. McKittrick, Ms. Woodman.
All right. Well, thank you very much again, Mr. Chairman, and again, Madam Vice Chair. Again, for the record, James McKittrick, Legislative Director for the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, here to testify in support of Senate Bill 346, which seeks to modernize the way that the department is required to conduct public notices. So we do go through the fisheries, the bill does go through the fisheries part of statute and is often amending a statute that has been on the books since at least the 1950s, if not prior, in an effort to allow us to move away from the traditional necessity of posting in newspapers and instead explicitly allowing us to utilize the outreach services we use currently, which are emails, posting on the website, social media, and even text message subscription services, which have all been extremely effective ways of not only soliciting feedback from stakeholders, but also making sure that stakeholders have information in a timely way. These methods also produce cost savings. It does cost time and money for the department to follow this very old statute and do newspaper postings. And before I wrap up and ask any questions, I did want to address the opposition to this bill. I think we got folks got a little too happy with the red pen, and so we are looking through line by line of this bill, and we're going to be addressing amendments here shortly, sending amendments to the committee shortly that meet the concerns of the opponents. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, and I assume Ms. Widman is for backup again?
Yes, sir.
Okay, question for Mr. McKittrick. I have one, Mr. McKittrick.
Sure.
In terms of the permittees, are virtually all of them available by text? I mean, do you have their contact where if there is a new regulation, proposed regulation, you can reach virtually all of them so they don't rely on a newspaper?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly the posture we're in currently. Sarah, if you wanted to pop in here really quick and just talk about some of the numbers that we have in terms of subscription.
Yeah, happy to weigh in on that. So there's a couple different methods that we're using, and it depends on how. So for example, if they're doing electronic reporting, we have automatic push out through that process for those doing it that way. Some of our fisheries, including crabs, have automated text messages that we will send out links and updates on any regulatory changes there. We also have the ability for anyone, the public or a license holder, to sign up for emails directed at the type of information they might want to receive from us, which includes regulatory changes. And then in addition to that, we do have the ability, if people give us information such as their email in the license system, to do automatic push outs to them with changes as well.
Okay, further questions for the department? Seeing none, that brings that hearing to a close. Thank you very much, Ms. McKittrick, Ms. Widman. We're going to move into the environment. Senate Bill 347, also Public Hearing and Notification Modernization Act. Let us start with Secretary Grumbles, followed by Ms. Casemeyer and Mr. Abbott. I see no opposition. I see a favorable with amendment on written testimony, but nothing orally. Secretary Grumbles. Could you unmute?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome back. And welcome back to all of you members of the committee. I'm Ben Grumbles, Secretary of the Environment. Tyler Abbott is with me, Mr. Chairman. He is our awesome backup for MDE. So this bill increases government access and transparency as Mr. McKittrick was describing for DNR, what our well-researched legislation does is increase the flexibility and the reach of having more public participation and involvement, and doing away with an outdated requirement of sending mail notifications or using newspapers. We're not prohibited from doing that, but we see the value in continued growth and expansion in creating virtual platforms, increasing public participation in every way possible for regulatory decision-making. It's also a way to help save money. And we look forward to answering any questions. We also look forward to responding to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation suggestion that there should also be a requirement that there's always a call-in number to supplement that if the internet service isn't working, and we fully support that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to answering any questions members may have.
Question for the secretary. Okay, hopefully your conversation with other stakeholders, if you have amendments, whatever is needed, to Ms. Morton, any amendments that are needed. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Ms. Casemeyer.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Nice to see you, or whatever this is. And many of you, I missed seeing you in person. But so on behalf of the Maryland Delaware Solid Waste Association and Synagro and some of the rest of the regulated community, I'm mostly going to say me too to what Secretary Grumble said. But I think from the regulated community, we do think it protects and actually enhances public participation. But what we've also learned during this whole pandemic is when all you can do is have in-person public hearings and meetings, it potentially can slow down legitimate processing of permits and the timeliness of responding to the public or responding to the regulated community. And so adding these additional flexibilities increases public participation, but also can potentially facilitate the regulatory process and the permitting process. And so from that perspective, we're very pleased to see the department advance these changes.
Thank you, Ms. Casemeyer. Questions for Ms. Casemeyer? Seeing none, that ends the hearing on Senate Bill 347. We will move to 349, Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund. Again, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an important bill that increases water affordability. So every community should be interested in this legislation. It's conforming with 2018 revisions that Congress made to ensure that the drinking water state revolving fund for our state has the opportunity to provide increased subsidy and also longer terms for loan payback periods, as well as lower interest rates on the loans. So this legislation is all about increasing the flexibility of the Maryland Department of the Environment to take into account the economic hard times that communities face, particularly disadvantaged and overburdened communities. This legislation provides increased ability for us to provide longer payback periods for loans, increased subsidies, and also reduced interest rates. We think it's very important to advance affordability and equity, and we fully support this and appreciate your willingness to hear and consider this legislation.
Mr. Secretary, will Mr. Fretwell also be speaking?
If asked, I believe.
Okay.
Jeff is our excellent backup,
Right.
along with Tyler Abbott.
Okay, well, let's start. Senator Washington, Senator Ellis, and Senator Riley have questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is just a clarifying question. How are you defining disadvantaged communities? And then I noticed in the fiscal note that there are some jurisdictions that can take advantage of this. So I'm just the two. So which ones are typically involved now? And then also how do you define disadvantaged community?
I know that for purposes of the EPA regulations, the disadvantaged community looks to low income. I need to get back to you specifically on that in terms of disadvantaged low income or minority population. I can also tell you, Senator, that on December 31st, Maryland Department of the Environment issued our environmental justice policy that we're very proud of. And for that policy, which we look to incorporate into all of our programs, disadvantaged is defined essentially as those communities where the low income or minority population is twice the average of communities in the state. We look forward to collaborative discussions on how that term is defined for different programs, but we think it's important to have a policy that provides additional subsidy, additional opportunity for those disadvantaged communities.
Oh, I absolutely support the idea of the concept, but yeah, but I just wanted to know if you're conforming, it says you're conforming to federal guidelines, just want to know, make sure that, you know, the disadvantaged is clearly defined.
I agree. Thank you.
In the statute. Thank you.
Senator Ellis, followed by Senator Riley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Gould, it's good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, so the Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund, is that just for state municipalities, cities, towns? Who can access this fund?
Thank you. This is a fund that is capitalized in large part by the federal government, the EPA, and each state has a revolving fund program that we provide loans or negative interest and zero interest loans, basically grants for drinking water systems. So it's essentially communities. In some cases, it can be businesses, but it's drinking water systems that includes primarily the treatment system. In some cases, it can be infrastructure connected to the treatment system. But it's an important program for, it's one of our prime public health programs for, to also allow for increased growth of communities in the state.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So I represent most of Charles County, which is a very unique mix of urban and rural. A lot of folks have wells, and if the wells fail or is contaminated, can individual homeowners who has a personal water production system, i.e. well, have access to this fund to really give them good drinking water?
The answer is no. This is primarily for public water systems, but there is some funding assistance that can be provided for private systems, but it's not through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. And Senator, I would love to have our experts in the water infrastructure financing program follow up with you. I know several of your communities and citizens have drinking water infrastructure needs. This is not a private well funding program. It's more for community public water systems.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Senator Riley.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Secretary, good to see you again.
Great to see you.
Have the overview with Senator Ellis. Would you please include me? I'm very interested in the subject. You mentioned it's primarily the public systems, but earlier you mentioned businesses. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I can, but with the important caveat that Jeff Fretwell and Tyler Abbott will also follow up with you. I know that there are times when some water lines, water systems can also help benefit industrial parks if you can argue that it's part of a public water system. So I need to get more clarity for you on that.
All right, well, let's defer that to the orientation with Senator Ellis, and I'd be very happy to follow up with my particular in the weeds questions. And the last one is always about the money. how much money currently in the drinking water revolving fund, and how much of that is federal money being put in versus state money? Thank you.
I don't have the answer to that question. I know we get about 12 or 13 million a year from the Congress and EPA to help continue to subsidize that revolving loan fund. I don't know, Tyler or Jeff, if you can answer that on the spot for the drinking water.
We'll hold it till the Ellis orientation, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, that completes the hearing. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Fry Hester.
Thank you. I just wanted to be included on the Ellis briefing also.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
We can talk
We
about
will,
resiliency as well on
At
that.
this point, we'll notify the committee when you're going to meet with people offline, which may be a majority of the committee, and we might have to do the open meetings law, but the secretary will follow up on that. Okay, that concludes the hearing on that bill. I'm going to shift to the vice chairman on the next bill.
I am unmuted, but my mic doesn't work. Okay, thank you. The next bill hearing is on Senate Bill 350. Mr. McKittrick, are you leading us off?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Welcome.
Again, third time's a charm. Nice to see you, Madam Vice Chair.
You too. Thanks.
Third time's a charm. So Senate Bill 350. This is another departmental piece of legislation from the Department of Natural Resources related to enabling what we're calling enterprise leases for aquatic plants. So under current law, there is limited ability and flexibility to allow individuals to experiment with the commercial feasibility of growing aquatic plants for commercial sale, as one would an oyster or salmon in the state. We've had several individuals approach the department over the years and are very curious about trying their hand at seeing if they couldn't get industry off the ground. Aquatic plants, there's many commercial applications for aquatic plants, not the least of which I believe is related to the COVID-19 vaccine and other vaccines. So that's sort of the breaking news out of that community over the past year. So this bill would just give us the flexibility to offer short-term leases and very small acreage leases to see what we can't do to expand the state of aquaculture in Maryland. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McKittrick. Is Mr. Rosher here as a backup, or does he want to speak?
Yeah, Carl's here as a backup.
All right.
But Carl, if you wanted to say anything, you're more than welcome to. No pressure.
Thank you. I'm okay. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Rosher. Then let's shift to Allison Colden from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and then we can see if there are questions in the committee. Ms. Colden. She is not present. Okay, she signed up to testify in favor of this bill with amendment. So colleagues can look for her testimony. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Riley, followed by Senator Ellis.
Thank you very much. Would folks in our give a city boy like me an idea of one or two of the types of products that would be in this enterprise leasing program?
So I'm happy to turn this over to Carl, but no, but in all seriousness, we're talking about native plants. So, oftentimes we're talking about types of seaweed. So Carl, if you want to jump in here.
Sure. Senator Riley, the interest that we've had early on with respect to businesses or individuals that wanted to raise aquatic plants have been centered around Gracilaria, which is a macroalgae. It looks like sea lettuce. It grows down the coastal bays in very salty waters. And they use that for a number of things, including food products. So that's one. And then this legislation wouldn't limit the production to food products. So you could use aquatic plants for things like the development of biofuels. Mr. McKittrick touched on another one, nutritional supplements, food products, and also in environmental restoration projects. But seaweed for food consumption is kind of the main interest right now. And folks that have come to the department really would like to evaluate whether it's even feasible in our portion of the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries. So that's
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Senator Riley. Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And Senator Riley kind of went down the path I want to go. So I think as I forgot your last name, but Carl, forgive me. You mentioned one particular plant. Could you say that name again, please? It's my first time hearing about that.
But Gracilaria, it's a macroalgae. It's commonly called sea lettuce.
Okay. And is that basically for the brackish, or you said very salty water area, or are there any folks interested in, say, this particular enterprise, say, along the Potomac, or, I really care about this because, my district, Charles County, have just a lot of shorelines along the Potomac and a lot of tributaries. And areas a little brackish, so I would like to know if you've heard of any interest from those areas along the Potomac or less brackish water.
No specific interest yet, but this would provide for the ability of someone that wanted to use those brackish waters for the production of submerged aquatic vegetation, underwater grasses, or shoreline stabilization plants to test out their culture and equipment on a lease, and then commercialize that operation and set up a business to grow and sell those plants that are needed for those activities. Absolutely.
So this bill will allow the leasing in not just the bay, but any body of water in Maryland. Is that what you foresee?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Senator Ellis. Oh, go ahead.
Madam Vice Chair, if I may, I understand that there is an amendment from Dr. Colden, and we're happy to accept that as a friendly amendment.
Friendly amendment. Okay, that's helpful. Oh, good. I've been informed by staff that Allison Colden has just joined us. We're glad that she's here from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Ms. Colden, the mic is yours. You are unmuted. Go for it.
All right. You can speak, Allison.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Great, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to address the committee today. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Allison Colden with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I'm here in support with a very simple amendment.
We can hear you.
Okay. I apologize. There's about a 30-second delay on my end, so I'm hearing myself back from about a minute ago.
So, Ms. Colton, I would recommend that you close or mute the YouTube channel if that's what you've got open.
Nope, I've got you closed on all my other devices.
Okay.
So I will try again here. Are we good?
Mm-hmm.
My apologies for the technical difficulties. I should know better by now. I just want to pick up a very simple amendment we'd like to offer for your consideration today. We are excited about the possibility of plant aquaculture in Maryland's portion of the Chesapeake Bay. It does offer an opportunity for addressing nutrient issues. Nitrogen and phosphorus could be taken up by those plants, which are then extracted for some of the uses that Mr. McKittrick and Mr. Grosher were discussing. We'd like to offer for your consideration one simple amendment to specify that only native plant species to the Chesapeake Bay are used in cultivation. There are other places in the code which empowers the secretary to promulgate regulations pertaining to the use of native plant species in cultivation. We just think it would be better to have language that is specific and explicit when developing a new industry and making a framework that is strong and protective of the ecosystem by not allowing any species that are non-native or invasive to be introduced for the purposes of cultivation. So with that, we offer our support and ask you to please consider that simple amendment. Thank you.
Ms. Golden, I think you weren't on the Zoom yet when Mr. McKittrick indicated that he thought that your suggestion was a friendly amendment.
Great.
So with that, I see no other questions from colleagues. That would conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 350. We have just one more bill hearing today, and that is Senate Bill 352. Mr. McKittrick, are you, no, Cassie Shirk, are you kicking us off?
Hi, Madam Chair. I'm going to yield my time to Kim Rice. She's our program manager in this area, and she'll walk through the bill.
Great. Ms. Rice.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and the members of the committee. As Cassie said, I'm the program manager for plant protection and weed management within the Department of Agriculture. Senate Bill 352 requests the repeal of the multi-floor rows management law. The department has not received a complaint in reference to this law in over 25 years. And as a program, we don't deem the law effective or needed at this time. And we have a weed control program that will work with growers if they do have an issue with multi-floor rows. We give recommendations. So that's what we're requesting from the committee today, and I am happy to take any questions.
Okay. I see no questions from the committee. I just want to state publicly that we have written testimony only from Michael Mason of Providence Strategies, LLC, and that is favorable testimony. Seeing no other questions, no comments, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 352. And since that was our last bill, that concludes the work of Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee today.
Madam
Thank you,
Vice Chair,
everybody. Yes, Senator Riley.
I have a comment and an observation. I was on a Zoom the other day where there was someone testifying or presenting, and as with Allison, there was a little bit of a problem with feedback and delay. And the solution was that their computer was on a Bluetooth, not hardwired, and by them going away from video and just doing audio, everything. So if somebody's on a Bluetooth system and we're having this communication problem, possibility of taking down their video but listening to their audio could be a solution. It's just wanted to put it out on the public forum.
That's helpful. Thank you, Senator Riley. You're a wonderful addition to our committee. We're glad you're here. Okay, colleagues, this adjourns our day today. I'll see you tomorrow or next week. Take care. Stay safe.